and welcome to another episode of the Hardcore Soft Skills Podcast. My name is Yadi Caro, and in each episode, we address a different skill with the help of an expert. This is the last episode of Season 8 until we return in a few weeks. Thank you for listening and sharing these episodes and for taking the time to invest in your career and your relationship to others, as this is what soft skills is all about. I have been focusing a lot this season on the topic of agility since this is a central skill to the way we work, even though this concept is regularly associated with software or tech. Today, we will dig deeper into the skill of agility for your everyday life. The Joy of Agility is the title of a book written by my guest, Joshua Kerievsky. Joshua is the founder and CEO of Industrial Logic. Since 1996, Joshua and his global team of experts have helped people across many industries leverage the wisdom and power of modern management and development methods. Joshua is an international speaker and author of the best-selling and award-winning book, Refactoring to Patterns. We will talk about the true meaning of agility, and you will learn mantras you can use every day to help develop this skill. Let's listen. All right, wonderful. Well, welcome, Joshua, to the podcast. How are you?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Yadi.
Yeah, so I've been wanting, I just recently read, recommended by one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto, John Kern, your book, The Joy of Agility. And I've certainly enjoyed it as a person who's trying to do agile transformations right now in the organization. So, and I truly enjoy all the items that you cover in the book. And I want to talk about that. But first, for the audience to get to know you, what in terms of why did you decide to dedicate your career to technology and in that particular field?
Well, yeah, I kind of fell into it because my father got into software, early on back in the 60s, and that's how he supported our family. So, we were introduced to software really early on and became I mean, I just enjoyed it. And I never really lost that love of software. So, it was kind of a natural.
And when it came to agility, how did you become interested in approaching software and development from an agile approach?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd been programming since even late 70s, early 80s. I was a little kid, but I was programming quite a bit. And then by the time that, the mid 90s came around, and a little bit later, we started experimenting with these lighter weight methods, which were different from waterfall. And it was, starting to be loosely called lightweight methods instead of the big heavyweight methods. And that eventually became called Agile in 2001. And really that was what got me so inspired, is that we could do more with less. We could, have a better fitting approach to software development and all the risks involved. And extreme programming was one of the major inspiring processes that came along that really just took on the biggest risks in software development and just took them on head on. Like we know what risks there are, and many of them, not all of them. I think lean startup came along and other things later that addressed more of the product oriented risks. However, that really inspired me, and I really just got deeply behind this agile movement, and from the earliest days. Yeah.
And let's dig deeper into the specific things that made a different from waterfall to a lightweight approach. What were some of the key differences that, or on your approach that of both methods?
I mean, I had experienced doing big upfront design.
Mm-hmm.
I did I worked at a bank on Wall Street, and I have to say, we built software and it worked. It wasn't a disaster. It actually worked. It was a lot of time spent analyzing and coming up with designs and trying to figure out what could go wrong and how could we make the design work. And but we hadn't written any code yet, so it was a lot of time really doing that upfront, analysis and design, followed eventually by the coding and the testing.
Mhm.
And processes like extreme programming kind of changed that completely. It said, we have to know what we're trying to produce for a business outcome, but let's get started building something sooner and let's evolve it. So evolutionary design was a huge part of this. And probably the biggest insight there was that you don't always know what your customers want you to build.
Mhm.
And sometimes when you don't, it's better to just start building something and keep showing them iterations of it and keep evolving based upon their feedback rather than trying to get it all up right up front.
Yeah. And when it comes to have, or what I'm sure you have found many naysayers or people that say, "Oh, this is not going to work." What has been some of the concerns with taking that particular approach throughout your career?
I mean, everyone is worried all the time, right? People are always, you know, they're worried. Any new idea that comes along, any new different, anything that's different from their experience is almost like a threat,
Hmm.
right? So, what I try to do is help people get into a sort of experimental mindset, whereas, where you can safely try new things and you can always go back to the old way. But if you acknowledge that maybe the current way isn't perfect,
Yeah.
that it could be better, then wouldn't you want to try a couple of ways of working that could potentially make you much more effective? That's the willingness to have an open mindset is really critical for trying to adopt new ways of working. So that's where it first begins, is are you even open to like experimenting and learning?
Hmm. Yeah, and I like what you address a lot in the book, "The Joy of Agility," about taking that approach to different areas of life. Basically, first, why did you decided to write that book?
Yeah, Joy of Agility. I really wanted to um, help people understand what agile really means and understand it from the point of view of agility exists in many human endeavors. It's not a software thing.
Hmm.
A lot of us who are in the tech field think of it as this tech thing, but if you look back at other movements and other things that happen in other domains, there's a lot of similarities, a lot of common stuff. So really, I started looking at the definition of the word agile.
Hmm.
Just the word itself. The word has never been coupled to software specifically. It's a word, agile, to be characterized by having a quick, resourceful, and adaptable character, or being
Yeah.
able to move with quick, easy grace. These are definitions that are in the dictionary about agile. So, what I've seen is that there's been a very formulaic, framework based sort of rituals and roles approach to learning to be agile. And I found that to be less than effective in terms of becoming agile. It's sort of like, let me just follow the playbook and I'll be agile. Whereas in my experience, it's great to know about practices. It's great to know about processes. Even frameworks are fine, but you're guided by the spirit of agility. Like, what does it mean to be agile? And if you understand what it means to be agile, then you can look at certain practices or experiment with things to see, does this make me more agile or not?
Hmm.
Does this make me more poised to adapt? Does this make me more resourceful? Does this make me quicker rather than being hasty? Right? And so the book is trying to point out, if you really want to be agile, here's these mantras that are critical to agility. And I don't care if you're a surgeon, a teacher, a lawyer, a software maker, that's what agility is.
Yeah, I like that very much in the sense of, yes, that's association of agility now with software development, and just thinking that throughout time, we as humans have had that skill set or the possibility of developing that skill. And you talk about mantras, and I in one thing that stood out from the book, when you mentioned the concept of wabi sabi, I think. What could you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. I was introduced to that concept by Ward Cunningham. And if you don't know who Ward Cunningham is, Ward Cunningham created the wiki.
Hmm.
And so we wouldn't have Wikipedia without Ward. Um, And when I first encountered Ward's Wiki, which was back in the 1990s, I was in my apartment in New York City, and I looked at this website, and it had this very kind of faded, grayed out logo for the wiki website. And I was like, this website's super cool, but man, that guy does not know how to make a nice looking graphic. Little did I know, he was going for that wabi sabi look. And so as I got to know Ward, I then understood it. The light bulb went off, and I read Wabi Sabi. Wabi Sabi is this wonderful book that talks about, imperfections and how the imperfections are actually sought after. Like you're not trying to make perfection, perfect cutlery or perfect dishes. You're shaping something on with your hands with clay, and it's okay to have a few minor defects or things like that. It adds to the charm. So Wabi Sabi kind of goes along with Agile and says, we're not shooting for perfection here. We're shooting to get things done, to get people, using stuff. And if refinements are needed, great, we'll add them. But, don't try to make perfection from the beginning, because it's too slow and it's often not even what people wanted in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. And embracing that idea of like, hey, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It takes discipline on our end to kind of be sure, like, okay, we're experimenting, we're releasing, or we're just trying new things. So that's a great concept. And I also, in the book you mentioned as well, talk a little bit about organized chaos in terms of agility as organized chaos. That for us who want to be controlling things and making sure things follow certain processes or steps is a little bit difficult to accept. How would you describe in terms of agility as organized chaos?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's, what we see is that companies, like there was a company mentioned in this wonderful Harvard article called the New Product Development
Hmm.
Process. And so that was really the birth of Scrum, because in that article, that pivotal article, they mentioned the Scrum, metaphor.
Hmm.
And they mentioned, I think it's a Japanese company. I don't want to get the name wrong, but might be Hitachi. In any
Hmm.
event, they would basically give a team a very challenging goal. Not tell them how to do it, but just give them a really challenging goal and say, hey, however you want to go about it, go for it. But this is what we want to accomplish. And so, that's really letting go of the reins. It's giving empowering people to sort of go after that particular problem, and not telling them how to do it. So there's a degree to which some people would feel like that's chaotic. Shouldn't we give them a process to follow? Shouldn't we, make sure they're doing exactly how we want it to be done? Now let's talk about, like, I've just been reviewing a case study we're writing. There's clients of ours that have to get like uh, FDA audits. They
Hmm.
get audited by the FDA in America.
Hmm.
Now there's other entities that are similar around the world. Okay, well, that's more constraints, right? You can't just let anyone do anything. If they have to follow certain procedures to make sure the FDA is happy, then great, right? So there's a spectrum of, how much leeway you can give a team. But in general, agile methods tend to delegate more and more of it down to the individuals doing the work.
Hmm. Yeah, and embracing organized chaos is certainly the concept about losing control. It's certainly a big, I guess, skill set that we want to develop as well. And you've also, in agility, you've talked about the testing ideas, losing control, or not losing, releasing control, not losing necessarily the control. And in terms of when I hear about agile, usually is the statement of fail fast, soon, or fast forward, or just the idea of failing. And you mentioned in the book in terms of it is important to fail fast, but don't rush. How do you reconcile in terms of like the speed with the how do we know we're not necessarily rushing?
Yeah, so like this is really super important. And this, when I say mantras, and I, you talk about this book and all that, it's like these live with me now every day. I
Okay.
mean, every day to some I am thinking about, like, am I being quick here or am I hurrying? Whether
Mm,
that's like dashing off an email or finishing a proposal, or even a conversation with someone that in my organization, I'm trying to ask myself, am I being quick or am I hurrying? Because when you hurry and rush, you make mistakes. Now, some mistakes are costly and some are not costly at all. If I write a bad sentence and then I rewrite it, hey, big deal. I made some, like, I didn't write the greatest sentence. That's nothing. It's actually good. It's a good failure. It's a fast failure.
mm-hmm.
I used to I like to like write stuff out quickly, get it out, and then I can look at it and go, oh, that's terrible. Let me rewrite that. Right. So that's failing fast, and it's failing safely. There's no risks there. When you rush and hurry, however, you can really harm yourself. In a workshop in Sydney, Australia, I asked a group of people, like, what's an example of where you found yourself hurrying and rushing, and then you had to pay the results, the consequences of that. And one individual said, well, one morning I took my motorcycle out of the garage, and then I had to go back in the garage to get something, and I sort of quickly, I rushed in terms of putting the um, what is it, the something that holds up the motorcycle, right? Some stoops, some little thing.
Mm-hmm.
He kicked it, but he didn't kick it all the way down in the right spot, so
Mm-hmm.
the motorcycle fell on his leg,
Oof.
and it broke his leg. And then
Oh,
he spent about the next 10 years before the leg was really back to where it had been.
oh, wow.
10 years for just rushing one morning.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that stuck with me quite a bit, that story, and I'm, it's inspired. Be quick but don't hurry is completely a mantra that the famous basketball coach John Wooden used to use every single day, multiple times a day with his players to have world class UCLA basketball players. He would teach them the difference between being quick and hurrying. And he'd blow his whistle anytime he caught them hurrying on the basketball court during
Mm-hmm.
practice or rushing. He wanted them to play quickly without hesitation, this beautiful, quick flow. Like, people would be like, we can't compete with UCLA Bruins. They're too fast.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't reckless. They
Mm.
weren't doing things that were really risky. It was a really well practiced quickness. He would call it quickness under control.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we shoot for. And that has a profound influence on my life. Decisions, all kinds of decisions. Even if I'm backing up in my car and I don't want to run someone over,
Mm-hmm.
okay, don't hurry and rush here, right? It's profound, and it's a part of agility. Being quick is a part of agility. It is not equal to agility. You have to have the other dimensions as well. Ease and quick and grace, or resourcefulness and adaptability go along with quickness. So never mistake agility for quickness. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, interesting that you mentioned that, and very important to emphasize, particularly when you mentioned the grace, so, gracefully doing things gracefully, as well.
Yes, that word grace is interesting, because I'm like almost like a etymologist at some point. I got to understand this word. What does this word mean, grace? And there are
Mm-hmm.
many definitions, but the what I'm interested in is how it's defined in terms of being supple.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you sit in a certain seat that's supple, it'll take different shapes and it'll accommodate that. And so to be graceful is to be adaptable. You're very quickly adaptable to different situations when you're graceful.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're very well connected.
Yeah. And what are some of the other mantras that you've live with every day?
Yeah, so I mean, another one is be poised to adapt,
Mm-hmm.
and that is very, very important if you're going to be agile. Right? You have to be adaptable, right? Adaptable is a different word from agile. If you're just adaptable,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily mean you're agile, because agile adds that element of quickness, that
Mm-hmm.
you're able to adapt quickly. Some
Yeah.
things take a long time to adapt.
Yeah.
Imagine today if Blockbuster started streaming, I mean,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, okay, you finally got to it. You adapted. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's
It took
just
a
you're
while.
not agile because you would have done that like really quickly after learning
Hmm.
about Netflix.
Hmm.
Um, so be poised to adapt really means to be ready, to be in a state of equilibrium, a state where you're ready to adapt. You're not like caught off guard and have to adapt. You are prepared to adapt. And usually that takes work, right? That means that you've done the pre-work to be in such a state that should some change come along, okay, we can deal with this gracefully. We're poised to adapt. Now, the word poise means to be in a state of equilibrium. And that brings us to another mantra, which is be balanced and graceful.
Hmm.
John Wooden would say, you cannot be quick if you're not in balance. To be in balance means not just physical balance. John Wooden would say you need mental balance, you need emotional balance, you need physical balance, and then we need balance on our team. We need a balance in terms of our offense and our defense. We need
Hmm.
a balance in terms of the size of our players. And then take that to business. And it's like, do we have a gender balance on our team?
Hmm.
Do we have a balance in terms of people's backgrounds and cultures, right? So we're not just homogeneous,
Hmm.
right? Because we can find better results when we're diverse, right? I grew up in New York City. I'm really accustomed to that. Balance, 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 hugely important. And really quickness is impossible without balance. So
Hmm.
to be balanced and graceful is a pretty hard, it's a great thing to aim for. These mantras are not easy. Like they're
Yeah.
challenging. But I think about them a lot, especially when I'm dealing with people. How can if I'm unbalanced, let's say I'm pissed off or angry about something, and then
Hmm.
I'm talking to somebody, let's say a client or at work, I'm probably not going to be at the top of my game. John Wooden would say to have champions, if you come on the basketball court and you just had a huge fight with someone, you're unbalanced
Hmm.
emotionally or mentally. Physically you may be in balance, but you're not balanced. So it our state of being really impacts our performance. So be balanced and graceful is another really important mantra. There are some others. There's one called start minimal and evolve,
Hmm.
and that goes back to a little bit of what we talked about earlier, which is the wabi sabi type thing. The let's start with something imperfect and
Yeah.
let's evolve it over time based upon learning. One of my favorite mantras in the book is at the end of the book, and it's called "Be readily resourceful."
Okay.
And that means to be resourceful is to be clever and quick at solving problems.
Hmm.
Now, to be readily resourceful, readily means to do something without hesitation.
Okay.
So it's not like you have to sit and wait to be resourceful. It's like you are immediately resourceful. And this is, of course, like, a superhuman. These mantras, again, are like, you shoot for them. You'll probably never reach them perfectly. But to be readily resourceful means you are, without hesitation, finding ways to quickly and easily solve problems. That's a tremendous benefit to us. And it's something that, we shoot for.
Yeah, I love all those mantras that you have and that you mentioned throughout the book in terms of those are things to live for that to help us develop the skill. Come certainly always seems like a work in progress as we try to become agile.
That's right.
When it comes to a in a work environment, as individuals that we can adopt mantras to approach things, but when it comes to a work environment where you work with a team and you're trying to instill some of those ideas, what are some of your recommendations for that?
Mhm. Well, okay. I neglected to speak about one other mantra in the book, which is
Hmm.
from W. Edwards Deming, and that is drive out fear.
Okay.
So if you're working with people in an organization, chances are they're afraid. They're afraid of changes. They're afraid of new things coming along. They're afraid of losing control. And so drive out fear is an incredible mantra for this because it really is focused on how can we create an environment in which people aren't afraid to maybe try a new way, maybe try something, not be afraid, not like really truly um, be maybe excited to try it rather than afraid that you're imposing something on them or that And that goes back to that control. Do they have the control to say yes or no to you?
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to try this or not? I mean, ultimately it is up to them instead of it being forced onto them. So driving out fear really important, I think, for helping to begin, a change in an organization. I think there's a variety of ways to make changes in organizations. There are, let's make little progress.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes little progress is all you can do. The organization is ginormous and they won't tolerate big changes. So the
Mm-hmm.
best you can do is little changes, and that's great. Other times, and it doesn't necessarily relate to the size of the organization, but other times you could put together a bunch of different things and say, why don't we try all of this stuff
Hmm.
with a pilot team? Instead of a little bit at a time, we're going to take on, like, hey, 10 new different ways of working, from how we do product to how we do planning to how we do development. All of there's going to be changes across all of those dimensions. And we're going to just try it. And we'll try it for 3 months and see how it goes. And if it's a disaster, we won't do it again. But if it works
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe we'll learn something from it. Maybe we can apply it elsewhere.
Yeah.
Now that's typically, and then I want to make sure that we're not compelling anyone to do that. We're asking them, do you want to try this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that want to ask in regards to that as well, the driving out fear and trying things. Is there a particular approach that you suggest to that when you find naysayers or um, people hesitant to just even make the little changes?
Yes. So sometimes if I could at least get them into like a 5-day workshop or some relatively large workshop where they can experience it,
Mm-hmm.
right? A simulation of it or something that really gets them to experience, what this new world looks like compared to
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing today.
Mm-hmm.
That can really help. The light bulbs can start to go off. I mean, in the ideal case, you're inspiring people to want to make this change. And, we find that really excellent training can help with that by inspiring people, by getting them to, you know, understand, hey, you know what? Now I get it. The way we've been working is leading to a lot of like delays and a lot of defects and a lot of challenges that don't necessarily need to be there if we did it this other way.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's kind of helping them along in a short amount of time to just at least get the light bulb to go off and maybe, get them inspired to try something new.
Yeah, that's great. Inspiration, very important. So it kind of um, as you mentioned, like the light bulb goes off and we can start connecting those ideas to our own environments. Before we go, I want to ask you as well in terms of what other advice do you have for people, any particular resources, recommendations when it comes to just adopting the agile mindset or the agility as a skill that you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's wonderful if you can find a really great agile coach.
Hmm.
I mean, I play tennis and I have a coach. And I've had, coaches throughout my life because I
Mm.
find that, in joy of agility. I mentioned this through the story of Atul Gawande. Atul Gawande wrote numerous books. He's a world famous surgeon. He wrote the Checklist Manifesto. He's written a bunch of other incredible books. And he said at some point in a TED talk, why is it that just athletes have coaches? Why don't other people have coaches? And he started looking, and it turns out other people do have coaches. The famous violinist Yitzhak Perlman. Turns out his coach is his wife, who also
Ah.
went to Juilliard, but decided not to go into performances and instead became his coach. So
Mm.
she's there helping him refine things and looking at his performances and all that. And so having a coach is great. I've had tennis coaches for years. They really help me improve. So to me, if you can find a wonderful group of coaches or a single coach, whatever it is, find your gurus and learn from them.
Mhm.
Um, I'd love it if you read Joy of Agility, because I think that
Mhm.
is a book for a lot of people to really understand what agile means and to perhaps get them out of the thoughts that it's just technical things or software related. Um, I think LinkedIn, for example, is a great place to go to ask questions and to learn about agility from so many experts that are out there, people that have, learned a lot over the years and could share what they've learned. So yeah, there's a lot of great ways to approach this. My friend Jim Highsmith wrote a new book called Wild West to Agile, and
Okay.
that is a wonderful historical, accounting of how we went from the primitive early days of software, to where we are today. So if you're looking at a historical view and want to see why did Agile come along in the first place,
Yeah.
you'll understand why it came along in the software field.
Interesting. Thank you for all those recommendations. And absolutely with LinkedIn, that's how I connected with you. So it's a great resource as well. And in terms of if people want to find out more about you, and I highly recommend the book as well. But if just people have questions for you, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm available on our website, industriallogic.com. You can go to the portion of the menu called company and find me in the bios there. I'm there, and that's an easy way to fill out a form and it'll go straight to me. That's probably the easiest. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm on X. It's hard to call it X, not Twitter. And I'm pretty active on LinkedIn though, more so than X these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, those
Yeah.
are a couple of ways to follow me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joshua, for your time and your expertise and for being here with me on the show today.
Thank you, Yadi. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you inviting me.
Thank you for listening today. Before you leave, make sure you go to my website, hardcoresoftskillspodcast.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Then go to the review tab and leave a review. It is the way to ensure this podcast is discovered by others. Remember that by learning soft skills, you make your hard skills work for you. See you next time.